Someone tells you that you did a great job, and instead of feeling good, something inside you tightens. You smile. You say thank you. Maybe you shrug it off with something like, "Oh, it was nothing." But internally, something strange happens. Your mind immediately begins arguing with them. They're exaggerating. They're just being polite. They didn't see the mistakes. They don't really know me. Within seconds, the compliment disappears. Not because the person took it back, because your brain rejected it. And the strange part is this. Most people assume discomfort with compliments comes from low confidence, but that's not quite true. In many cases, the discomfort comes from something deeper, a psychological protection system your brain built years ago, a system designed to keep your identity stable, even if that identity is harsher than reality. So when praise enters the room, your mind treats it like an intruder and quietly tries to remove it. Tonight, we're going to explore why your brain sometimes fights harder against praise than against criticism, and why the most self-aware people often struggle the most to accept kind words. Think about the last time someone complimented you. Maybe it happened at work. Your manager reviewed your project and said, "Honestly, this is one of the best reports we've had this quarter." Everyone else in the meeting nods. But instead of feeling proud, your brain instantly begins searching for flaws. You remember the part you rushed, the slide that could have been clearer, the email you forgot to send. Your mind quietly whispers, "If they really looked closely, they wouldn't say that." Or maybe the moment happens in your personal life. A friend says, "You're one of the most thoughtful people I know." And instead of absorbing it, your mind starts flipping through memories. Times you forgot to call someone back, moments when you were impatient, times when you failed someone, and suddenly the compliment feels inaccurate, almost uncomfortable. Sometimes the reaction is even stranger. A compliment lands, and instead of warmth, your brain feels suspicion. Why are they saying that? Do they want something? Are they being sarcastic? You scan their tone. You read their face, not looking for confirmation, looking for the flaw in the praise. And then the moment passes, you move on. But the compliment never really settles inside you. It just evaporates, leaving behind a quiet question. Why does something kind feel so difficult to accept? To understand this, we need to look at something psychologists call self-verification theory. Your brain does not primarily seek happiness. It seeks consistency. Your mind builds a long-running story about who you are. This story forms slowly, through childhood experiences, through feedback from teachers, friends, parents, through every success and failure that shaped your sense of identity. Over time, your brain constructs an internal file, a narrative about you. Maybe it says, "I'm dependable, but not exceptional. I'm decent, but not impressive. I try hard, but I'm not naturally talented." This identity becomes surprisingly important to your nervous system, not because it feels good, because it feels predictable, and the brain values predictability more than positivity. So when information enters your life that confirms the story, the system relaxes. But when information contradicts the story, the system reacts. Not with celebration, with resistance. Because changing identity is psychologically expensive. It requires rewriting the internal file your brain has relied on for years. So when someone says something that challenges that file, your mind quietly pushes back, not because you dislike praise, because your brain is protecting the stability of the story. There is also a neurological layer to this reaction. Your brain is constantly predicting the world. Network called the default mode. Network, often called the DMN, runs in the background. This network manages self-reflection, internal dialogue, mental simulations of social interactions. When you are lying in bed replaying conversations, when you are analyzing your own behavior, when you are imagining what others think of you, the DMN is active. Over time, this system develops expectations about your identity. And when new information arrives that contradicts those expectations, the brain flags it. This activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system. Now, this does not mean compliments are dangerous, but your brain does not only detect physical threats, it detects identity threats. If praise suggests you might be more capable than your identity allows, the brain senses instability, and instability feels unsafe. So the mind begins repairing the gap. By explaining the compliment away, they were being polite. They didn't notice the flaws. Anyone could have done that. These explanations restore consistency, which calms the system, even if it means rejecting something positive. But there is another reason praise can feel uncomfortable. Compliments do not just change how others see you. They change the expectations placed on you. Imagine someone says, "You're incredibly talented." That statement quietly raises the bar. Now, future performance carries more pressure. Now, there is something to live up to. Suddenly, praise becomes a responsibility, a reputation to maintain. And your brain notices this immediately, because expectations introduce risk. If you accept the compliment fully, you accept the possibility of failing that identity later. And the mind often chooses a safer path. Reject the compliment, lower the expectation, return to baseline. It is not modesty, it is psychological risk management. Here is the strange twist. The people who struggle the most with compliments are often the most self-aware. They have spent years analyzing themselves, cataloging their flaws, examining their behavior closely. And that self-awareness creates a powerful internal critic. You know every mistake you have made, every awkward moment, every imperfect decision. So when someone praises you, your brain compares their simple statement to a massive internal database, and the praise feels incomplete because it does not include the flaws you know so well. You believe you are being honest with yourself, but something subtle is happening. You trust your criticism more than you trust other people's positive observations. Your internal verdict outweighs external evidence, and that imbalance shapes how compliments land. There is a simple pattern behind this reaction. It often looks like this compliment, identity conflict, mental rehearsal, rejection. The compliment arrives. Your identity story conflicts with it. Your brain begins reviewing evidence, and then it resolves the tension by dismissing the praise. Once you see the pattern, it becomes easier to recognize, because the discomfort is not random. It is a predictable loop. Your brain protecting a familiar version of you. Changing this pattern does not require forcing yourself to believe every compliment. Blind acceptance would not be honest either. The real shift is learning to treat compliments as data, not verdicts, data points that might update the story over time. The first step is simply noticing the reflex. The moment praise lands and your brain starts arguing with it, pause, observe the reaction. Recognize that your mind is protecting a narrative. The second step is curiosity. Instead of rejecting the compliment immediately, ask yourself a simple question. What if this person is seeing something I have not fully acknowledged? The third step is balance. Your brain is already excellent at collecting evidence against yourself. Now you slowly begin allowing evidence in the other direction, not replacing criticism, balancing it. And the final step is patience. Identity stories change slowly. They are rewritten through repeated experiences, repeated confirmations, repeated moments where reality contradicts your old assumptions. Over time, the nervous system learns something new. That praise does not have to threaten stability. It can expand it. Many people spend years believing they are simply bad at accepting compliments. But that is not really the truth. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. Protect a stable identity. Reduce uncertainty. Keep the internal story coherent. The discomfort you feel is not weakness. It is the echo of a protection system that once kept you safe. But protection systems do not always update automatically. Sometimes they keep defending a version of you that no longer fits, and somewhere between the story you tell yourself about who you are and the version of you other people keep noticing, there might be a gap, a quiet space where a more accurate identity has been waiting. Not perfect, not flawless, but far less limited than the one your mind learned to protect.